Yep.
Um, if you mind hanging out a little bit, you'll come back for our roundtable.
Absolutely.
And Justin, before I bring you on, I want to bring on a special surprise guest who's going to come in and say a quick hello. Steve Kirsch. Welcome to VSRF Live. Steve, it's so great to see you. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Steve.
Good. Yeah, Pierre, good to see you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your work.
Yeah, trying. And figured you needed a break, so glad you're upright and smiling. That's all I'm going to say.
I was, it's pretty emotional losing all your vision or I'd say virtually all my vision in one eye. So I may be able to regain it. We'll see. I had a CSR that basically bled out. I had a subretinal hematoma, which basically covers my eye receptors in blood. And so you can't see through the blood. So the blood has to drain out for me to see again. And the blood also kills the retina cells. So the trick is to get the blood to clear before it kills everything that's underneath it. And so I didn't have surgery. I did not have a retinal detachment. I just got a shot in the eye. I went down to UCSD and got a shot in the eye, and that's
is that to help the blood resorb a little bit, or
it's essentially weed killer. It prevents blood vessels from regrowing because it's the blood vessels that shouldn't be there that cause the problem because they burst. And so I said, "Yeah, it sounds kind of like weed killer," and he says, "Yeah, that's kind of a good way to think about it." So I'm on this drug that was actually invented at UCSD to prevent the regrowth. It has this really funny name that I've never heard of before. It's VABYSMO.
That's the name. That's not an acronym for anything.
No, that's the name.
You're supposed to be able. Trade name.
Vibissimo, whatever. So I'm sure there are a bunch of people listening that have heard of it. It's the newest class of drugs to prevent the regrowth of vasculature in underneath the retina. So, I'm hopeful for the best. I'm hired extra staff to work with me in the meantime, and hopefully I'll be able to regain a lot of the vision. I could be stuck with what I've got. There's just no way to tell. They say I'll know in 4 months. So,
you have numbers, Steve? Like any prognostic? What is the chances of?
Yeah. I asked him. I said, so what are my chances? Because I'm a numbers guy. Right?
I knew you would ask that, Steve. Anybody would.
Yeah. So he says there's 30% chance that you'll be able to make out letters. There's 30% chance that it'll be difficult, and there's 30% chance that you don't regain anything. So it's kind of, it's like, you roll the dice and I did nothing wrong. I'm just sitting at my computer, minding my own business. I'm looking at the check data, and I guess I'm not supposed to look at the check data because it basically busted one of my eyes. And maybe that's a message to just try to dissuade me from looking at the data, but I'm not going to, that's not going to dissuade me from looking at the data. In fact, I was just loading up. I just fired up VS Code on my home machine here. I was in Tahoe before, and I'm cloning the repo right now that I have all the data and analysis in. Because I was on a call with Joe Freeman earlier today, talking about the data. He says, "Hey, look, if you can show this effect is huge, when despite the number of comorbidities, then he says you got me, and they won't be able to attack this." So I'm pretty motivated to make sure that happens. And I can tell you this check data is very strong, and it's very damaging, and it shows that the health authorities have not been looking at the data, and all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that these people like Professor Jeffrey Morris throw at the problem and claim that, well, you haven't accounted for comorbidities, you haven't accounted for the SES, which is the socioeconomic status of people, that if you haven't accounted for that, you can't say that you proved anything. And I'm going like, yeah, that's like saying that if you flip a coin or if you roll a dice 50 times and it comes up 6 every time, it's more likely that it is a loaded dice than it is that it's a fair dice. And that's all I'm saying. It's like really more likely that this thing is loaded. And they said that, the Moderna, the difference, and the reason it's different in Moderna is because there's a different efficacy in terms of Moderna. And that's why you're seeing this mortality difference, because Moderna has a different efficacy. And that's why there's this consistent difference. And I point out that, the consistent difference happens when there's no COVID. And we discovered today, I was on a call with, let's see. Wow.
You're allowed to forget, Steve.
I'm allowed to here. Let me just pull this up here. I should not do this.
Either way, Steve, I knew nothing would slow you down.
Well, it did. It did for a while. I had to go visit the clinic. It took like 7 hours to get from Tahoe to. I had to go through San Francisco. The flight was delayed in San Francisco, and WhatsApp is not responding, but my brain is working faster than WhatsApp, which is Claire Craig. I was talking to Claire, and we were going through the data, and I'm talking about the time series data and so forth. And I said, wait a second. They claim that this thing is due to efficacy difference, but there's more active ingredient for Moderna than there is for Pfizer. So the efficacy for Moderna should be higher. So if anything, if they're trying to explain it by efficacy, Moderna should have lower mortality than Pfizer, but it has 1.30% higher mortality than Pfizer. So they can't say, it's more drug, it's more effective against COVID. It just isn't working out for these guys. And
sure.
And the other thing on this, and I know I'm getting off topic, and Livio's gonna, I'm messing with your show here. But the other thing that's really important about this Czech data, and I was talking to Claire Craig. She lives in the UK, and I'm saying, Claire, whenever I go to London, whenever I use the subway, they're sending me this message. And have you ever used the subway in Pierre in the UK?
The undergrad.
In London? The undergrad, right. But what do they tell you every time you get on board a subway train in the UK?
Mind the gap.
The gap.
They tell you to mind the gap, exactly. And you know what? That's exactly what I did with this Czech data, because this Czech data has a gap between Moderna and Pfizer. And so I minded the gap, just like they've been telling me all these years. It's finally paid off. This mind the gap thing is finally paid off because the gap is consistent no matter what the age range, no matter what date you're injected, and no matter what date you die. There is a 1.3 mortality gap that is that Moderna is 30% more likely to kill you, and that is consistent. Now, so it can't be the efficacy because it's got more drug. Yep. And Denny Rancourt did a study on VAERS, and he found 30% higher mortality if you got Moderna. Interesting. And you have biological plausibility because you have higher active ingredient, you're going to have higher kill power. And I just discovered today that Pfizer looked at using the same 100 microgram dosage of active ingredient. But you know why they stopped? They backed down and went to 30 micrograms?
Why?
Because 100 was too toxic. So everything aligns with this story. And the 1.3 number is so amazingly consistent no matter what 5-year age range. We looked at all these 5-year age ranges. We looked at the time series doses 1 through 3, 1.3, 1.3, 1.3, 1.3, 1.3, 1.3. It's like this data is sending a message. And if the medical community cannot hear this message, we have a big problem, because they should have heard this message, because the health authorities should be looking at their own data, but they're not. So I reached out to a journal editor that I know, who knows the former journal editor for JAMA. And I said, I need a favor. I need you to call up your friend and we'll call him George because that's his name. We'll have and ask George to look at the data, because when I tried to get George's attention to look at the data, he said, Well, I'll review your data when it's published in a peer-reviewed journal. And I said, George, without your help, it's probably never going to get there. And of course, this is what they do. They say, look, you're an idiot. This data shows nothing, and I don't even want to spend my time to look at it. So if I can get this guy to look at the data, he will see what I see. And it is a train wreck. And it will destroy the credibility of the medical community. It will destroy the credibility of the regulators. It will destroy the credibility of the public health officials who are supposed to
Steve, have you written it
protect
up
us
yet?
against this. Written it up, Pierre, of course. Yeah, so I was, so I've written up, there are a couple of Substacks. There's a third
In
Substack
manuscript
coming.
form.
No, that's coming. We need to get all the analysis out first. And I have, there are some people writing it up at a manuscript to submit to a peer-reviewed journal.
All right.
So yes. So I'm
Waiting
trying to get all my bases covered. And,
I like it.
it's nice going out with the Substack first, because then they attack you and you find out all of the things
This is true.
that you need to defend against. And in fact, we didn't know about this comorbidity database that this guy, Uncle John Returns, brought up. And he said, look at this. Moderna has higher comorbidities. That's the reason that more people died. And I said, we looked at the data closer than you did. And there were months when it was reversed, where Pfizer had all the comorbidities. And guess what? The effect was bigger.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So there's
That's
no
crazy.
way they're going to defend against this.
They'll just keep ignoring. They'll just try to keep ignoring.
Yeah.
Hopefully this gentleman, George, will actually
we'll see.
and get it out.
Yeah, we'll see. But I tell you that we track the comorbidities, and they're like going in opposite directions. Sometimes they're going opposite, and sometimes they're going the same. So in other words, the comorbidities cause you to die more. Sometimes comorbidities sometimes cause you to die less. And so it's one of these things where it's there, but it's not correlated. You need to prove that it's correlated. You can't just say, hey, I found an aggregate, this thing was higher. But if you don't show that the comorbidities ratio actually affects the mortality ratio, then your argument is flawed. And they don't have a leg to stand on this Czech data. This is why this Czech data is so important. And I know I went through a pretty convoluted discussion about this whole thing in my earlier Substacks. I'm writing a Substack now, which is minimizing it's basically summarizing what I just said. Hey, here's what the data shows. They can't explain it. They need to accept it if they can't explain it. And it is very, very powerful data.
Sounds good, Steve.
So,
Keep going.
All right.
Well, Steve, thank you for dropping in amongst your issues that you're having. So we really appreciate that. And go get some rest, brother.
All right. Thanks.